Positive Spin, presenting positive, innovative, and solution-oriented news from around the world. On today's program, we profile clean energy activist Ursula Slodek, recipient of the 2011 Goldman Environmental Prize and leader of the movement that created Germany's first cooperatively owned renewable energy power company. In our next segment, Associate Bill Miller of Global Connections Television interviews Jonathan Granoff, president of the Global Security Institute, concerning the ongoing threat of nuclear weapons. Later, we'll hear the song Universal Flag by Sharon Benson, who promotes the work of Brian McClure, founder of the Universal Flag Foundation, as he travels around the world promoting this universal symbol, celebrating the oneness of all life. And in our final segment, we'll see an interview with Dr. Robert Mueller and his wife, Barbara Gahn Mueller, conducted by David Wass of the Next Step television program. In this inspiring interview, Dr. Robert and Barbara Mueller share their dreams for a better world.
In our first segment, we focus on the important environmental work of Ursula Slodek, recipient of the 2011 Goldman Environmental Prize, the world's largest and most prestigious environmental award. Following the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown, a radioactive cloud quickly spread across Europe, including parts of Germany. Working with her husband and a small group of parents, Ursula led a 10-year project to take over the local power grid and allow people throughout Germany to choose safe, reliable, sustainable energy. The community successfully raised the funds to buy the power grid, which now provides safe, renewable energy to 100,000 people. The goal of the cooperative company is to bring renewable energy to 1 million customers by 2015.
In 1986, when the Chernobyl disaster sent radioactive clouds all over Europe, we knew we had to do something against nuclear energy. Many parents were really concerned about their children, and so some of us formed a group named Parents for a Nuclear Free Future. We began to educate ourselves in how to save energy. We started in our own home, and then we tried to motivate others to do the same. We wanted the energy company to support us, but they told us no, because we want to sell energy and not to save energy. And so one day we had the idea to take over the grid.
Citizens could generate their own power from solar, hydro, and wind.
Small producers are paid when they feed their electricity into the grid. Consumers are rewarded when they save energy.
So then there was only one question. How do we get the power grid? When the election came up to decide who controls the grid, we knew it was now or never.
EWS, the Schunau Electrical Power Company, held 2 citizens' referendums and won them both.
The power company said, well, you had the votes, but we have the grid. And we want 9 million Deutschmark, and either you pay it or we don't give you the grid. So we had a campaign asking people to help us raising this money.
It took EWS 7 long years to purchase the electrical grid.
This power company was afraid that this was the beginning of a movement, and it was.
Under Ursula's plan, homeowners have small power plants called cogenerators. EWS is now collectively owned by more than 1,000 citizens.
A year after we had taken the grid, the German electricity market was deregulated. every person could buy electricity from the company he had chosen. And that is the idea of renewable power, because it's decentralized.
This is grassroots at its best. More than 100,000 people now have the electric current from this very small city, and they are very proud of it.
We want to have 100% renewable energy in 2050. All studies say it is possible to do that, and so we will do it.
For outstanding environmental achievement in Europe, the 2011 Goldman Environmental Prize is awarded to Ursula Sladek, Schönau, Germany.
We now join our associate, Bill Miller of Global Connections Television at the United Nations, where he will interview Jonathan Granoff, president of the Global Security Institute.
Let's talk about the Global Security Institute. What is it? What are your basic goals? What are you about?
We're a civil society organization. When the UN was formed, people realized that there had to be voices in the international community that would be able to advocate for the whole, not just for the nation states. If you want to protect the oceans, you have to have somebody who's looking at the entire issue. And nuclear weapons are a global issue. So when Senator Alan Cranston and Mikhail Gorbachev and Oscar Arias and some other people initially formed this, and I was privileged to be part of that, the perspective was we need to address nuclear weapons from a global standpoint. That they themselves, the weapons themselves, are more of a problem than any problem they seek to solve. So we have a series of programs at different levels of society to advance the premise that through strengthening global cooperation, lowering the value of these weapons, getting control of the nuclear materials, promoting the rule of law, we need to move toward and achieve a nuclear weapons-free world.
Are we losing track? Are we losing sight of how awesome these weapons are? Do we just not pay attention on this particular issue, or do we not hear enough about it?
We don't hear enough about it, and people don't realize how hazardous they are. The weapons that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the equivalent of about 15,000 tons of TNT. The weapons that we have now are in the we have weapons now in the megaton range, 1 million tons of TNT. In fact, the Russians actually, the Soviets actually tested a 50 megaton weapon, which is, I think, several thousand times the magnitude of Hiroshima. A 1 megaton is 80 Hiroshimas. A 10 megaton, a 350 kiloton weapon, which is a normal weapon, is 10 Hiroshimas. 1 megaton, the International Court of Justice, when they addressed this, said, imagine a train with TNT stretching from Los Angeles to New York. It boggles the imagination. If there were an exchange of the arsenals between India and Pakistan now, civilization as we know it physically would be dramatically undermined because of the effect on our climate. But imagine if there was a tugboat that went off in a major city, London, Los Angeles, New York. You would end up closing international commerce completely. You would end up closing all of the premises upon which our civilization now rests. Freedom, civil liberties, the ability to talk and move freely. All of these would be dramatically changed. The problem we're facing now, unlike during the Cold War, is not just the problem between states. The states that have them now are not even enemies, except for India and Pakistan. The problem we have now is a sub-state actor getting them, a terrorist, a criminal syndicate, or somebody, a computer hacker, making it appear that there's an attack between countries and stimulating a conflict.
Now, this is a very important topic. There's a lot of great information. People can go to your website at www.gsinstitute.org and get more information. They can certainly Google the United Nations or go to un.org to find out what the UN is doing. Speaking of the UN back in May of 2010 had a review of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, commonly called NPT. First off, what is the NPT? And secondly, what are 2 or 3 or 4 of the main recommendations that came out of that month-long meeting? It was a very intensive session. So what happened?
Well, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, the KGB and the CIA looked at the problem and they said, unless we have some legal constraints, we're going to have dozens of nuclear weapon states very soon. And any regional conflict would be an existential crisis for humanity.
How many weapons do we have in this world today?
There's around 22,000.
About 22,000.
96% are in the hands of 2 countries, Russia and the United States. The rest of the countries of the world that have them only have a few hundred each. So it's really these 2 countries have to set the pace. So right now the choice before us is either proliferation or movement toward disarmament. And that's a clear choice right now. That's why you have people like Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, Sam Nunn, William Perry, Colin Powell, and similar eminent persons in many other countries stepping forward and saying, we have got to commit and move toward zero. You can't tell people these weapons are good for us, but they're no good for you. The realistic and the moral have now come together as never before. It's both morally correct to eliminate weapons of indiscriminate effect that can't tell the difference between civilians and combatants, but it's now a practical necessity, and in addition, it's a legal requirement. The International Atomic Energy Agency, which is tasked with monitoring nuclear facilities, and was instrumental in dealing with one country that engaged in illegal conduct, Iraq, and disarmed them, I might add, never has spent more than $130 million in an entire year for all their inspections. So our country alone is spending actually more than $130 million a day on our arsenal. We need to change that equation. We need to put real robust money into controlling the materials. My friend Joe Cirincione said in the very good movie Countdown to Zero, we've never lost an ounce of gold from Fort Knox. We need to have the same lockdown on the nuclear materials, and the international community, everyone has an interest in this. The realistic possibility, there is no realistic possibility of allowing this unstable situation to continue. We have to take care of this situation. Right now, we're not existential enemies with the countries that have nuclear weapons. I bought my gas yesterday at a Russian concession. My computer wasn't working the other day, I was on the phone with some young people from Bangalore, and the money that I used for these goods and services was backed by a loan from China. We live in a world that's integrated. We are no longer enemies with one another. In fact, we're finding that we actually benefit from the interplay and interchange of cultures.